Well, good afternoon, everybody. WJI is very pleased and fortunate to have Angela Lang as our Salon speaker this noon. Everybody present likely knows how difficult it is for people of color to live well in Milwaukee. And Angela Lang has not been one to sit back and just look at the distressing statistics. She has acted with an emphasis on community organizing. In her history as a chapter as a founder of ACLU's Student Alliance at UWM, work that began even before she graduated from high school. And I would note that she has graduated quite a bit in the ACLU. She's now vice president of the board of Wisconsin ACLU. There's another chapter as organizer and state council director for the Service Employees International Union, and still more as political director for Our Future Wisconsin. And now what some look at as her crowning work, executive director of BLOC, BLOC, Black Leaders Organizing for Communities. Many of us are at least somewhat familiar with BLOC from its work on elections, but there's a good deal more. There's a focus also on engaging citizens to build long-term political power and on ensuring a high quality of life and access to economic opportunity for members of the Black community in both the Milwaukee area and also throughout the state of Wisconsin. I want to point out one of the programs of BLOC that I find very interesting, and I'm going to assume I'm not stealing any thunder from Angela, but it's called Silent Canvas. When I read of this program, I thought this is really unique. So this program sends out candidates and office holders into the community with one of BLOC's organizers. And unlike a typical trip into the community by elected people or candidates for office, they're not allowed to speak. They aren't identified as notables. They're there to observe and learn. And I urge you to check out the website, the BLOC website, and you'll see some of these notables pictured, national, state, and local. And you'll see the comments too on how they saw this program functioning. What a unique opportunity. We have much more to learn about what BLOC is doing today. So now let's hear from its founder and executive director, Angela Lang.
Thank you so much for that sweet and kind introduction. Also joined with me is our Deputy Director, Keisha Robinson, who will go into more detail about the programs that she spearheads and that she is the architect for, including our ambassador program, as well as part of our Court Watch program that I think some folks on this call might be interested in. I will definitely talk about the Silent Canvas as well. But one thing I wanted to mention about Keisha is that Keisha has been here since day one. Started out as an organizer, knocking on those doors in the really, really cold dead of November. And Keisha was also there when the Silent Canvas was actually thought of and created, and how it's kind of taken on its life of its own. NPR did a story on it, presidential candidates, this whole thing. But being able to have somebody see every aspect of the organization and play damn near almost every role in this organization is really, really invaluable. And so glad that she is on here to speak into, like I said, only she can do justice by the ambassador program, as she is the architect of it. But I will go into a little bit of the founding and the why, and then Keisha can go into the more specific programs. So as you heard, Keisha and I both have extensive experience in organizing, both informal and formal. I always am of the belief that a lot of our folks, specifically Black folks, are organizers by nature, just because we have to in order to survive. And 2016 happened. We know the results of that election. And I remember everyone feeling really defeated and not really knowing what to do after 2016. And for me, one of the frustrations the most was hearing people who, were well-meaning white people that were saying, well, if you people just voted, we wouldn't be here. And that was almost more infuriating than the election result itself, because here we had a whole community that was not engaged, and some of the most disenfranchised folks being blamed for the entirety of a whole election, when there were whole groups of people, as we know and recall, that voted for Trump. And so I felt like that narrative was very misguided, and it was actually very harmful in how people viewed the politics and the engagement in the Black community. And we were kind of seen as the reason that 2016 went the way it was. We also note that there was low voter turnout for lots of reasons. And I remember being very frustrated. I worked for For Our Future at the time, thinking I was out of a job. And I remember complaining to my boss about how this narrative was incredibly harmful and actually wasn't helpful of understanding the analysis and how we actually got here and how to prevent it from happening again. And I was very lucky and very fortunate enough to have some national connections, some people that were also interested in supporting Black organizing before it became a trend and it was cool. And we got in a room one day. We had like 2 national organizations fly in. We had support from labor, and we locked ourselves in a room one Saturday and BLOC was formed. And we were trying to figure out, how do we make this different? How do we make sure that what happened in 2016, specifically the level of turnout and the lack of engagement, doesn't happen again? And one of the things that we said is that this needed to be very much for us, by us. I've worked for organizations, I've worked for candidates in campaigns where they knock on their door a couple weeks or a couple months before an election and say, hey, I know nothing about your community, but here I am to tell you what you and your community should do, and it's going to change your life, and you should just go ahead and vote. And then poof, they're gone, and then never to be seen again, except for another 2 to 4 years when they're asking for votes again, which makes our jobs harder when we're knocking doors, because they're like, well, you all just came before and then you just disappeared. And we have to tell people, and we had to build that level of trust that we were not those institutions and we were not those organizations that were acting very transactionally, and that we actually cared. We had to tell people, you're actually going to get sick of us because we're going to call you so often. We're going to have the opposite problem. We're going to keep you engaged. And so one of the things that came out very early on, as Keisha and the other organizers at the time were knocking on doors, people heard we were specifically knocking on doors in the 53206 zip code, the most incarcerated zip code. So again, you had a lot of well-meaning folks that said, oh my God, what are you hearing? What are you hearing? And we had to tell people what we were hearing, but then we wanted to be very careful about how we were just giving out this information. We didn't want people to take these stories and anecdotes and keep them in their pockets and to, use them at their own leisure without actually engaging with Black folks. And so we knew that, and we kind of had a conversation as a team. And then we were at a holiday party for 9 to 5 Wisconsin. And Senator Chris Larson was like, what are you hearing? And one of the organizers at the time, Mac, she kind of winked at me and she was like, well, if you want to know what we're hearing, you should come shadow me. And he was like, cool, Angela knows where to find me. Here's my card. Follow up, email my office. Let's get something scheduled. And then he walks away and she whispers, she's like, shit, I didn't think he was going to say, yeah, what do we do? And I was like, I'll help you draft this email. I don't think Mac had ever emailed like a legislator before asking for something like this. I was like, I'll help you draft the email. And we did the next day. This is the full story, right? So we drafted this email. And then after we hit send, we were like, Milwaukee politics are petty. We should invite everyone so people's feelings don't get hurt. That's the full story. I usually leave that out. But that's why we ended up inviting everyone. And then the first round, we had Senator Larson, State Representative David Bowen, Supreme Moore Omokunde when he was on the county board, and Jonathan Brostoff. They all did it. And I remember texting Senator Larson afterwards. And I said, hey, this is our first time doing this. How did it go? And he said, Angela, I saw the best and worst of Milwaukee in a span of 2 hours, because we intentionally do not put people in their own districts, right? Senator Larson is my state senator. I live by UWM. He represents Lake Drive and Bayview and all of that. But when he goes to Madison, there's a lot of anti-Milwaukee sentiment and a lot of dog whistles about Milwaukee. And so he needs to be fully equipped to talk about what Milwaukee as a whole needs and not necessarily his district. So when we do silent canvases, we make sure that even if you are representing part of the North Side, we put you away from your district so you can get a different experience. Now we've had probably 100 or so silent canvass participants. We had 3 presidential candidates do it, 2 of which didn't understand the silent in the silent canvass, but that's okay. They're eager to talk. The higher up you get, sometimes the less you're able to actually interact. So I understand Cory Booker and Beto O'Rourke's eagerness. Keisha actually did the silent canvas with Beto O'Rourke, and he was running in between doors because he was so excited and like knocking on doors like himself. But so we'll take that. But we've had so many people say that they've come back to our office in some cases in tears, understanding their own privilege, understanding just seeing things from a a different experience. We've had journalists do it as well. We've had partner organizations like Planned Parenthood, because they want to make sure that they are understanding the communities that they're serving in a more holistic way as well. So we have opened it up to other organizations. You all are welcome if you all are interested in something like this as well. But it's things like the silent canvas, where we try to take these different ways that haven't really worked for our community and bring that power back. And the silent canvas wasn't something that we set out to do, but it kind of turned into this big thing. We had NPR, actually shout out Keisha and David Crawley before he was county executive. He was in the assembly actually at the time. And so NPR followed him around and wrote a whole article about the silent canvas and how in cases it can increase voter turnout, because people are like, who is this person at my door? Why are we talking about these things? Then they look them up and they're like, oh, this person was at my door. And then they're starting to engage and to be more informed about those candidates. And so for us, being able to have a year-round basis allows for us to do that deep civic education. That allows us to do things like our fellowship program, where we can slow down and talk about civic engagement in a way that's more than just voting. I'm sure all you all are familiar. We are home to the most incarcerated zip code. And that zip code is, I believe, 95 or 99% Black. And so what that means is that you also are I would say intentionally or unintentionally, diluting Black political power, because if you constantly are locking up Black folks and inherently taking away their right to vote, a lot of people, and Keisha has a story, a lot of people don't know that their voting rights have been restored yet. And so people are being removed from the system. Or several years ago, if you all may remember, Scott Walker used to put up these billboards that would say voter fraud is a felony and just have handcuffs, and they would only put them up in the Black community. And so people that would be off paper would be like, yeah, I can vote, I'm off paper, would see these billboards and be like, well, maybe I can't vote. Let me just not risk it because I don't want to get arrested. So we see all of these different ways. And there are folks on our team, unfortunately, who haven't even had their voting rights restored yet. And that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be engaged. There's so many ways to include people. And unfortunately, there are times people are like, oh, I can't vote, I'm a felon. And then that's it. And then they're just not engaged. But there's so many other ways. They can call their friends and family. They can, if they're interested, maybe be a BLOC ambassador. They're talking to the community. There's so many other different things. They could testify at city budget hearings. They can have meetings with legislators. But I think we just write people off if they don't have the ability to vote. And if we're trying to build long-term Black political power, we need to make sure that everybody is there and understanding that civic engagement is more than just voting. Because if it's just voting, we're going to have a hard time continuously trying to build this long-term power. And so lastly, before I turn it over to Keisha, I'll say that one of the things I'm the most proud of is just seeing the growth in our team. A lot of our team members, so we launched in November of 2017. So we're really excited that we're hitting 5 years in November. But our team has grown and we're preparing to add to our team. We're hiring 25 more people. We're actually, Keisha is going through the headache of hiring the 25 more people, but BLOC is adding 25 more people to staff next week to do the direct voter contact and the outreach. So we're really excited about that. And something that just constantly warms my heart is that when we first started this, Keisha and I were doing orientations, right? We're like, all right, this is what BLOC is, you know, this and that. And now we have a group of lead ambassadors that have been with us for several years that are actually building out the curriculum and will be leading the orientation for the team all next week. So something that Keisha and I would do, the lead ambassadors are training the new folks next week. The ambassadors, they write their own scripts in the field. I'm sure some people may have seen, if you are familiar with canvassing or have ever canvassed before, someone gives you a script, you look it over, you see if you have any questions, and then they put you out in the field, and then that's it. You hit as many doors as possible. A lot of those scripts, quite frankly, may not be multiculturally competent. A lot of those scripts are in language that doesn't resonate and doesn't really work. And so we said, hey, y'all been doing this a while. Y'all know the framework of how scripts are structured and the intro, the ask, and all of that. How about you all write these things? And so we have this kind of built-in internal leadership development program in this pipeline, because not only are we trying to build this kind of external power, we can only do that externally if we have strong internal leadership development. And that's something that we weave in virtually everywhere to our ambassador program, our Court Watch program, and all of these different, now that I think about it, because our Court Watch organizer came from our ambassador program and now she's leading this work. So again, you kind of see this like internal leadership development development pipeline that continues. And one, it takes the burden and the headache off of Keisha and I, because it's less stuff that we have to do, which is great. We love to delegate, but just to see them be able to step in the role and like not feel like they're drowning in it. It's like, I can give this to you. I'm here if you need me. But like they're taking it and running with it, and to watch them take a project and run with it and be very intentional and strong and take everything that they learned is, to me, I think what makes this all worth it. I'm not gonna lie, it's been a depressing couple months in both Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, everything that's been going on in our cities. But being able to know that there are people that are fighting every single day, despite going through really tragic personal situations, but are showing up to work in whatever way that they can, because the work is so important to them. And very grateful for that. And I think that's one of the things that makes BLOC really special and really unique. So with that, I will be quiet and turn it over to Keisha.
Hey everyone. So like as Angela said, my name is Keisha Robinson. I am the Deputy Director for BLOC. Started out as an organizer in 2017. Yes, knocking doors starting in November. I knocked doors before. I didn't, know what all it entailed. I kind of knocked doors in the community that wasn't of my own. And so the experiences were definitely different. I admit that my motivation, it wasn't all there, going into the communities. And I'm like, okay, coming from knocking doors, had knocked doors in Delafield, and even as far as Thiensville, it was long story. And so knocking doors in Milwaukee, it was just definitely different. And I just remember, like, I don't think, I can do this. I don't think I want to do this. Like, look at our communities, like, look at everything that's going on. And that was my attitude. And then I also felt like they're not at the doors going to hear, they're not going to want to hear what I got to say. Or I put myself in their shoes. I was this voter at the door when people would show up to my door. And I'm like, I don't want no part of this. These politics, blah, blah, blah. Working here is when it really kicked in. I did do work for 9 to 5. I did do paid family medical leave and things like that. But when I got here into a space to go into a community, essentially what's wrong with the world, is wrong in our community. So all the problems we have in 53206 and the surrounding areas, the problem is the problem that the world has. Brown people, Black people, persons of color, we're considered at the bottom of the, tadpole. We get resources last, or we get denied resources, things like that. And so coming here, working at this space, it was different. And so I go door to door and I hear these conversations, and it's people like, it's so much, no, it's so much hopelessness. No, I'm not participating. I'm not voting. It won't change for me. It won't change for our neighborhoods. And that mindset was at so many doors that it'll make you come back to your office space and say, what am I doing? How can I go change that narrative? What can I do? And so Angela and myself alike, we sit with these problems, and we know that we're only 2 people. And so how do we do this? And so I think that's what makes her the executive director. As she explained everything in a nutshell. And so what I want to take just a couple minutes to say about the ambassador program. So here is why it's unique, and all struggling communities need an ambassador program, like all around the states. So we got these group of individuals that came to us as ambassadors, mind you, for the most part, none having political experience. The political terminology, they didn't have the knowledge of that. So it's like we're starting at ground zero, so to speak. And so we get these people here and we make them realize, we talk about their issues, and then they realize how participating in elections and voting and participating with your community can change this narrative. So then they begin to learn. They begin to the days we can't go outside, when weather is a factor, or if dangerous things happen, and we value our people, so we won't send them out that day because the neighborhood is sensitive. So we keep them in and we learn and we teach, and we go over a lot of things, and it resides with them so much so that they stayed in the work. Our turnover rates were not high. Like, we retained our people because they wanted to learn more. And the more they learned, the more they realized that this coincides with my life. This is my life. So why haven't I been doing this? Why hadn't I been involved? And so it sat with them, and those group of individuals stayed with us the year of 2019. And they became lead ambassadors in 2020, in which Angela spoke that those ambassadors now teach the incoming ambassadors. So essentially, they're teaching the people that were in their spots why it resonated with them and why it became important to them and how it made them, it kind of like heightened their existence to everything that's going on. And they're able to go to the door and explain this to people, and then they're able to buy them in as well. And so that's what we miss a lot in a lot of situations. If you don't have directly affected people, and then if you don't have the people that these issues are concerning at the table, you will not get anywhere. Yeah. And so we took these people from this community, we trained them up, and now they're training others. And now I would say we are about in like 4 to 5 groups in of the people they have trained. And which is why we're growing now. We have 19 ambassadors, and fast forward to next week, there'll be 25. And so now those first 19 that I spoke to you all about, they're now pursuing, they love this work, and they all want to stay in this work, but want to see how can they, what areas can they jump in to make a greater impact. So that's where we at now, and which is why I said that all states need a BLOC ambassador program, because it's about, it's not, as one of you alluded to earlier, it's not just about politics. Yeah. It's about being civically engaged. It's about informing. I know Angela spoke about a lady at the door that me and an elected official talked to. So we're door knocking, normal work routine every day, and we knock on this one door. She just happened to be on my roster this day. And she was like, yeah, no thanks. I don't, what y'all got? I don't vote. And we like, me and the elected official are speaking to her, and we are like, why don't you vote? She says, because I'm a felon. And so we're waiting for the rest of the reason why she doesn't vote. And then she was like, yeah, because I'm a felon. And we were like, okay, are you still on probation? And then she goes, no. She was like, oh, and she was kind of like a middle-aged, maybe older person. She said she got the felony 15 years ago, and that she was off papers a year or two after the 15, that time period. So she could have essentially been voting for 13 years. And she just didn't, because she thought as a felon, she cannot vote. So imagine the conversation she had with others, and they feel this way. Imagine her family members that feels this way. So imagine you have all these people that on the surface, we would tell them, oh, you don't vote, you yada, yada, yada. We cast them out, we throw them away, not knowing the real situations of what's going on. Not knowing something hurts you, just as much. And so she didn't know, and that's what kept her away. So I just say that to say that why the ambassador program we have is unique. It trains, like we do one-on-ones. If we meet someone at the door and we realize we're only here for a couple seconds because we do have a job and a mission, when we see people that's totally lost like that, we don't, leave them there. We set an appointment with them, we do one-on-one, and we do follow-ups. We also encourage them to bring anybody to this meeting that you think, may want this information as well. So we got to kind of start like making it a domino effect. Yeah. Or otherwise we're going to keep being in the same situation we always once were. So I know y'all been listening a while. I want to put y'all to sleep. But yeah, I'll just say with that, we have the ambassadors program. We have a fellowship program. We just have been consumed with a lot of things and programs. And so we didn't run it this year. The fellowship just briefly pulls the person in that maybe does work or that maybe has some free time, maybe about 5 to 6 hours a week, that's wanting to know more about politics, that may be seeing ads on the TV and like, gee, I want to, get more into that, but I can't. So the fellowship program kind of was like a soft touch. Mm-hmm. It kind of like gave people, gave them the basics of what's going on. And so we do that. And we also, the newest thing that we have is the Court Watch program. So we started that in February. We wrote it out in February. I've met with Edgar and Margot a few times and everything. And so they gave us really great advice. And we're trying to figure out how to demonstrate it and execute it so much so that it does change the narrative of what's going on in those courtrooms right now. You have, judges and DAs, full immunity, but they're committing all kinds of prosecutorial misconduct every day. And we all know as adults what happens to the person when they get no kind of pushback, when they feel like it's them against the world, when no one will. Basically, the slogan that a lot of people use today is, who's going to check me?
Yeah.
Meaning, I can do whatever I want. Who's going to say something? Who's going to check me? And so we have to get rid of that out of the one place that takes people's lives every day, that has full reign over. I decide if I want them to do 5 years today, or if I want them to do 25. Right. That is serious. We're saying it. These people are living it day by day in those cells. And so it's just things like that with the Court Watch program. We're trying to make sure that we implement it again, so much so that it's successful enough to change and at least make these people that have so much reign over our lives to look at it from an unbiased lens, or else they'll be in trouble. So I'll leave that there. And I'll kick it all to y'all.
And we're also very excited for the state Supreme Court, because we started our work with the state Supreme Court in 2018. And now, people are getting a jump start on this next state Supreme Court race. And there's been candidates announced. And even just last week, we had our first state Supreme Court candidate, Everett Mitchell, in our office, having a conversation with our team. And so seeing how courts are playing all these different roles, even something as important as the state Supreme Court, which we may not go in front of ever. We are on lawsuits, so maybe we do. But in a more like interpersonal, individual way, a lot of folks are not going to make it in front of the state Supreme Court. So why should our community care? And so we've been doing a lot of education around that. And we sound like nerds, but we're actually really excited for the state Supreme Court race in the spring. So
yes,
just need to throw that in there.
Edgar has a question.
Yeah, so I mean, I know, I want to say you all, we all, I'm not sure right now, but you all have done a lot of work on state Supreme Court races, starting off with Dalit. We were all at her party, and the work you do is educating voters, right? So I want to ask you, and obviously we have a new state Supreme Court election coming next year. What are the qualities you look for in a state Supreme Court candidate?
That's a very good question. I would argue a lot of the same qualities that we look for in a state Supreme Court candidate are similar to any candidate. One is people are like, well, what do candidates need to do to earn BLOC's endorsement? Engage us early and often, right? We can tell if you are coming in the 11th hour just to get that photo op with Black people, right? We know that, we can see it. No. We actually just had a discussion today about cutting off our silent canvases. Anybody that's on the August ballot, you cannot do a silent canvas after July 15th. You're not going to slide it in. You had all year, you know what they are. You can't just slide it in and be like, hey, look, I did the thing with BLOC and try to ride our coattails to your election. That's not how it's going to work. And so I think our team, the way I always describe our team is that they can be a tough crowd. And I say that in the best way, because as Keisha outlined, there's a lot of stuff that's gone on in our community. They are tough. They vet very, very clearly. And it's very clear when a candidate physically is uncomfortable being in an all Black space. Unfortunately, we can tell. We can read that body language. We can see when people are uncomfortable with being in an all Black room. We can see how people are talking about our issues. There was one candidate in an election in April came to our office, had a good discussion, or so we thought. We had a discussion about reckless driving. Reckless driving is something that we feel strongly about and how it's framed. It's framed largely in just criminalizing young Black kids. But we're not talking about like these white dudes that are on their 4th DUI. We're not considering that reckless driving. So we brought that up to this candidate of like, we need to be careful of how we're talking about reckless driving, so it's not just another dog whistle. And he's like, oh, I never thought about that. That's really good. Let me keep that in my back pocket. There's a debate coming up tomorrow night. I'm going to bring this up. And I happened to turn on the debate, and we all kind of turned it on at the same time in our group chat. We were like, watch this debate. So we turned it on, and lo and behold, by the time we turned it on, the first question was about reckless driving. And I was like, I want to see his answer. Did his answer say anything that we told him about? No. Did his answer say anything about what he had supposedly learned from us? Did he incorporate anything? that we gave him on a silver platter of like, hey, you should think about things a little bit differently. No, he did exactly what everybody else did because it was safe and easy. And so a lot of our team knew that it was very our team was very upset about that, right? Because we knew that he may not have won that election or was going to win that election, but to look us in the face and say, that's a really great, idea. Thank you for teaching me something. And then to go and to continue harmful narratives that we told you are harmful. You may not want to do that. Proactive engagement is important. We have like a phrase internally, you want our vote, come get our vote. We are not in the business of like reaching out and saying, please come meet with our people. You know what needs to get done. We know the reputation that we have. We understand our entryway into the Black community, and so do candidates that run. And if it's kind of like candidates need to know what organizations to talk to. And there were candidates that in the spring election that still have not reached out to us, but yet are going around and like, how come BLOC doesn't like me, but yet has not reached out or engaged in any way. And so it's unfortunate, we are available. We always want to have folks around, but I think for candidates to really, really, truly earn our support and endorsement, candidates need to be authentic, they need to be genuine, and they need to show that and display that. People ask the question, well, what are you going to do when you're elected? And this is not an endorsement, it's just something that he said, but Everett was like, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back to BLOC. I'm not going to ignore you all. I'm not going to ignore, the communities that I want to work with, like so many other candidates do. And one thing that he also said that I think really resonated with our team is that a lot of candidates talk about what they will do. But if they don't have a track record of already doing it before they're elected, it's hard to believe they're actually going to do it after they're elected. And so all of that to say is that when people make visits to our office, all of those things are weighed with our ambassadors, and people can kind of see through all of those different things. And at the end of the day, people want to feel that they're being heard, and they want to feel that they're being engaged. And we want to feel that it's all being done in a really genuine way, and not just because it's an election year, because we can see through that.
Robert, go ahead.
Edgar asked basically the same question I was going to ask basically. I was asked is, how do you decide who do you do want to endorse? And when it gets to that point, how do you make that decision?
So we have an endorsement process, which people don't like, but we do it. So our endorsement process is we run an internal election if we need to. So there's 5 spots for ambassadors. If we have more than 5 people that are interested in running, we have an internal election for those spots. We have our board members that are on there. Staff is allowed to participate. So we'll have interviews. We'll, have candidate interviews. The ambassadors largely drive the discussion. They will create the questions beforehand. They will be the ones asking the questions. We've seen them in the last several endorsement processes. They've been getting more and more passionate and more like, no, answer my question. You didn't answer it. So they're getting more and more kind of revved up with some of that. And like I said, staff, we all get to be a part of the endorsement process. We get to ask questions and provide context as well. But one thing of note is staff does not get a vote. So I get all the phone calls when people don't like our non-endorsement or we endorse the wrong person. I get the phone calls, and I love that I could be like, our ambassador said, because we wanted to make sure it's truly community driven. And so yes, Keisha and I and the other staff, like we may be able to provide extra context, if there's something that the endorsement committee should know, like something behind the scenes of like, okay, here's the real gossip about these 2 people don't like each other or whatever. If there's extra context and analysis that we need to provide, we will. But generally, we don't have a vote. And so we want to make sure that is, again, continuously being like for us, by us, with support of staff, but largely it's community driven, because if it's community driven, then it allows us to actually build that community power. If it's top down, it's not going to work. We're not building that power if it's top down.
Jim, go ahead.
It's a little simplistic to say this, but I think some believe that Republican legislators, or some of them, might warm up to Milwaukee if they could have some more positive experiences with Milwaukeeans and with Milwaukee neighborhoods. I imagine you've tried to get Republican legislators to participate in the silent canvass. So could you tell us if you have, and what luck you've had, or whether there's a strategy to do that?
So we don't, for our silent canvas, there's like a sign up form like on our website, and it's kind of just there. And once initially in 2018, we were the ones sending out the invitations. We had about 7 or 8 candidates for governor do it in May when the primary was in August. So when we first started doing it in 2018, we were the ones sending out the invitations. After NPR wrote a thing and ended up being like this whole big thing and everybody was talking about it, we no longer solicited. We said, hey, if you want to have this educational moment, you have to reach out to us. So I can honestly say that we have not reached out to any Republicans, but I can't say that we reached out to any Democrats to do it either, outside of when we first were soliciting those. But we did invite in the first round, however, when we said we needed to invite everybody because Milwaukee politics can be petty, we did invite all of the representatives and all the state representatives, all of the senators, all of the common council, and all of the county board that represent Milwaukee. So in that first round, if they fall into that category, they also did get those invitations. It was just they didn't participate. And then we have no longer solicited and said, hey, come join us on this thing. People have asked us that question all the time, same with like endorsements as well. We're like, listen, like if people aren't engaging with us, it's not, if Ron Johnson, I don't know about right now, maybe not today, but like a week ago, if Ron Johnson was like, hey, I would like to do a silent canvas, we would honor that, right? We'll be like, fine, cool, whatever. Probably not going to vote for you. We're not going to endorse you. But like we would honor that if he were to reach out because maybe he could learn a thing or two. I know he does a lot of work with things like the Joseph Project, but that is one aspect of the Black community and not all of it. And Lord knows, judging by his reception at Juneteenth last year, he's got a little bit more education to do when it comes to the Black community because he wasn't quite welcomed. So I say all that to say that we have our BLOC agenda on our website. We do have our overall values. If we feel that you don't fall into our values, we're not going to waste anybody's time and bring you in for an endorsement. But if you would like to learn and be educated and do a silent canvas, we would honor that. But I can't say anyone else has so far.
Thanks.
Angela, you talked at the very start before we formally started, you talked about maybe opening an office in Kenosha. Can you talk about your, like any expansion, like exactly how big are you now? You have 25 new people coming in, but can you talk about how, like your growth and what you see about like moving into other communities in the state?
Yeah, so some folks may be familiar with Kyle Johnson. He started out in 2020 with our team as a special project organizer, AKA meaning go help and build this coalition in case Trump doesn't leave office. We didn't anticipate January 6th being a part of our calculations, but he was building this broad coalition. A lot of it had to do with politics. He actually lives in Kenosha, lives just a couple blocks away where the two folks were murdered by Kyle Rittenhouse a couple years ago. So he has, he's been on the ground a little bit with that rapid response. And then originally we were like, just going to expand to Racine. I'd been trying to build out Racine for the last several years. I remember going to Racine. I was like, we can't just come in. We got to like assess the lay of the land. How can we be helpful and supportive? And then Jacob Blake happened and everybody was like Kenosha, and there wasn't a lot of infrastructure. Kenosha's right, down the road from Racine. So originally Kenosha was not a part of our plans, unfortunately. But with everything that was going on and everything kind of being centrally located, we felt it was important to add Kenosha as well too. So right now, Kyle has moved into the political director role, but still lives in Kenosha, still doing a lot of that on the ground rapid response, was very, very present during the trials. And doing, I always say like he's one of the reasons things actually didn't pop off after the verdicts, because he was holding space for like yoga and music and just like healing spaces. And that's literally why Kenosha didn't burn after Kyle Rittenhouse was able to walk, is that he was doing a lot of that work. Last September-ish, we hired a Racine organizer. So she has been working very closely with Kyle and building out stuff. We were just having a staff meeting earlier where we normally do a back to school drive in Milwaukee, and now we're like, let's do one in Racine as well. So we're trying to replicate a lot of those things. We are hiring up for our ambassador program. We are going to be having a small program, maybe about 15 or so folks, maybe even more if we're able to. But we also wanted to use this as an opportunity to have the ambassadors help train and be supportive too, where they can. It's a new phase for us because we're so used to everything being very Milwaukee focused and very Milwaukee centric that I'm just like, okay, I need to learn more about Racine and Kenosha if we're actually going to do all of this right. And we also don't want everyone to feel that we have like 3 separate mini organizations that are functioning all together. So how do we build this cohesion? So our Racine organizer spends a lot of time in Milwaukee shadowing and observing, working with Keisha about how to replicate the ambassador program down there as well.
Margot, if I could, just one other question about elections. I'm curious whether you have created your own database of voters, or do you partner with the Democratic Party or other organizations?
Yeah, so our work is on the independent expenditure side. So we are not allowed to coordinate or partner with the Democratic Party. The walls do go up at a certain time. I do have monthly meetings with Ben Wickler to share information, but at one point we can no longer talk about, you know, our work and collaborate anymore. But we do sit at the America Votes table, which is kind of like the independent side of it. So all of these different organizations, I know VOSA's, Working Families Party, Citizen Action, a lot of groups like that are part of the America Votes table. And then we kind of coordinate our work there. And through the America Votes table, there is this massive database that everybody across the country uses called the VAN, the Voter Access Network. That is how we do all of our partisan doors, because you have partisanship scores, you have if they lean Republican or Dem, there's a lot more partisan stuff in there, but we still hit doors in between elections. And so in between elections, we use an app called Organizing Empowerment, which is a lot easier for us to add new contacts. So while we are hitting every door in an election season with our targeted specific names and addresses and any information we know about them, it's very hard to add new people into the van. There's all this like red tape, and a canvasser can't just do that, right? When they're knocking doors, right? So being able to use Organizing Empowerment allows us to add new contacts, and it allows us to hit every door. So our thinking is that during elections, we can only talk to the people that are deemed regular voters, because it's very hard to turn out non-voters in an election year. And so in between elections, being able to use the Organizing Empowerment app, add all of them, engage them, hopefully we get them to vote for the first time, and then they will be in the van on a more regular basis. So this is a way for us to expand our universe and being able to hit the people that we may not be able to hit during an election year, but slowly start to engage them, make them regular voters. And then hopefully if they are regular voters and vote multiple times, they will make their way into the Voter Access Network or the van.
Oh, interesting. A lot of work, but I know it has to pay off in the end for you. Excellent.
Yeah.
Becky, go ahead.
Hi, Angela. Can you explain your relationship with Tides? Just because with lawyers in the room, it's interesting, I think, and how that works in terms of your, you know, working with them, reporting to them, being independent.
Yeah, so they're our fiscal sponsor. So all of the day-to-day managerial decisions are made between Keisha and myself. And so when it comes to office culture, things like that, we all have like Tides handbooks and all of that, but day-to-day management is done internally. They do our admin side. They handle our grants, they handle our books. If I need to sign anything, I technically can't sign any agreements, grant agreements, award agreements, or anything like that. So Tides needs to sign all of that. We meet with Tides every 2 weeks. We have like, there's one central point of contact, then there's also other folks that Keisha works with, but we have a one point of contact. Is it monthly or every 2 weeks? I don't know. It seems often. I think it's every 2 weeks where we're talking about budgets, any outstanding things, any things that we need from them. We do talk to them probably on a weekly basis in some way, shape, or form. So we feel very, very supported by them. And it allows us to not have to worry about the compliance on the C4 side, for example, or some of these other things. It does build that safety net. And then it allows us to focus more on the program. We do have a PAC, which is unaffiliated from Tide. So that is something that we have to manage internally, which is fine. Y'all love to hear this. I just throw money at lawyers to do the thing that I don't want to do, including compliance. But other than that, Tides has been incredibly supportive, and we've been able to kind of find this balance of having them being able to support us on the administrative side, but also staying out of kind of like our office culture. But they are very, very supportive in terms of like leadership development, in terms of, hey, we want to do something completely out of the box. We want to have a wellness fund for anybody in the community that needs mental health support, and we want to pay for their therapy. How do we do this? projects. And so Tides would be like, hey, we can connect you with other projects that we support as well, and they may have something. So being able to work with Tides and the Tides network more broadly, and being able to work with other organizations has been really helpful. And like I said, there is a lot of administrative work that Keisha does, and we definitely need to offset some of that. But it would be a hell of a lot more if we weren't fiscally sponsored. So they're able to kind of take away some of that stuff. I don't have to worry about compliance and reporting because they take a small portion of an administrative fee that is more than worth it, and they kind of handle some of that stuff. So it's great.
Gabriella, go ahead.
Hi, Angela. Just a quick question.
Gabby.
You mentioned that there were cases that you had that you were working on. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that, or is that?
Oh, well, not anything now. Like, we were on the redistricting case, so like that was a thing. Like, everything is all public. The first lawsuit that we were a part of was in 2018 for the lame duck extraordinary session trying to limit Evers's executive powers. That was the first time we had teamed up with groups like Protect Democracy, as well as Law Forward. I don't think was Law Forward at the time, but we worked with Doug and Jeff as well. And then last year was the opportunity for us to sign on to the redistricting lawsuit. And so we were one of the main plaintiffs for the redistricting maps with Law Forward. So we work very closely with Law Forward. Doug and Mel and Jeff and all of those, they're good folks. So anything like that kind of comes up in the democracy space, which has been great. But yeah, we're not like, we're not actively suing like MPD or anything like that. This is all stuff that's like redistricting, which is generally over now. I think there's some outstanding stuff if we want to appeal in federal courts and whatnot. So there's some loose ends there, but we don't have anything like super active at the time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions for Angela or Keisha? I just have one more. Angela, if you could talk about, like, do you do any work with juveniles? Your focus is mainly on adults voting, but that engagement that you do you have any focus on youth in those communities?
Can you talk about the youth programs?
Yes.
She asked if we worked with juveniles at all. And so I feel like talking about youth.
So we don't really work with juveniles. Like, what we do kind of is if they're under 18, we will kind of like refer with lit, with things like that. The one thing that we have been discussing, so we would like to go into schools as a group and speak with youth. Essentially, we know that a lot of people with the reckless driving, and they're just like shunning the youth and saying they're causing all the trouble and things like that. So we have been looking for avenues, like how can we, on our level, reach these kids and like at least talk to them, hear from them. Like, so many people talk about the youth and they talk about the kids, and they just react negatively to them, but they do not take the time and see why they're acting out like this. What do they need, or what can we do? If you listen to, that, I think that we'll get a better idea of how we can be more helpful to that population, because we need to. Mm-hmm. It's spinning out of control. And then you got that along, with the poisoning of the lead water, something that we know these kids drink all day, every day.
Yeah.
And if we want to talk about mental health and the realness of it all, we have to look at that. Yeah. It's what's happening. And so that's where we're at with youth. We're looking into going to the schools and things like that. We have our back to school book bag drive, and we kind of do things throughout the year that they can attend and be supportive and feel supportive.
And I think what I would say too, thank you for, Black Hogwarts with Lit. So we team up with Lit, and every time we get like youth questions, we always try to be careful and say that we want to support our partners in Lit, because Lit, their whole purpose is to work with youth of color. And so while that is not necessarily our lane, we do partner with them. And we also can't ignore that, like, sometimes young people just gravitate towards us. Yeah. It's weird to think that Shanice is only 22.
Yeah.
Right. And she's been with us like 2 years. Right. Yeah. So like we have like younger folks that naturally are attracted to us. And I think folks are you hear some of the other ambassadors, even the younger ones, speak very passionately about wanting to do more stuff with youth, which is very interesting because I was like, you
Yeah.
are the youth. But they want to do more because they're like, I see my younger brothers or my cousins or my nieces or nephews, whatever it is, they want to do more. And so there's times where like they are trying to engage. It's not as robust as say Leaders Igniting Transformation. Like I said, that is their full lane is youth of color. So we try not to step on that. But we also know that like folks are connected to us in that way. And so we've been trying to figure out how are we partnering with Lit a little bit more. But then, you know, our ambassadors, they've came up with the idea that they wanted to go into schools and talk and do some of these like civic engagement type of trainings to high school students. And I know the League of Women Voters was doing that because I did that a couple times, and that's something that we wanted to do. So while it's not, you know, 100% our focus, we do acknowledge that there are lots of challenges, even more so in Milwaukee, the way, as Keisha said, we vilify these young people. You know, the Kia boys, yes, are a problem. And like, why aren't we finding like creative solutions? Keisha had an idea. Do we know people at NASCAR? Do we have the Milwaukee Mile at, you know, the state fair? Get them to just like do stuff like that. Have MATC say, hey, this is our mechanical program. Let's enroll you in things. And, you know, how are we able to lead from a more compassionate place with these young people instead of just automatically vilifying them, because that's what's leading them to have this behavior. They don't feel that they have a future because no one is caring about them. And so a lot of our folks talk about young people a lot, and we try to figure out different ways and resources. One of the things that I'll mention too that I think we want to target young people for this is that we have a thing called Wellness Wednesday. Today is Wednesday. We try to take a moment where we're taking a breath, taking a moment to just be human and to center ourselves. Our team is actually texting out our infamous Wellness Wednesday text, where we text the community as just a reminder to just take care of your mental health. And we said, what does this look like to have a mental health community event? Because our team one day started talking about how we're losing a lot of young people in our community to suicide. And so trying to figure out different ways and tools and resources. So we're thinking about how do we build out a community event about wellness and target young people and come together and provide some sort of healing as well. And I know none of this all talks about politics, but I'm of the belief that just our existence and even our wellness is seen as political in some cases and seen as a sign of resistance. And so if people are being taken care of in a full sense and are full and whole in a mental health standpoint, and specifically young people feeling that they have a future, then they'll see how all of these kind of connect, as Keisha said, right? How this connects with people's lives like day to day, and then they're more likely to be involved, as she described in that fellowship program too.
And also, just to add a tidbit about that with the juveniles, I think it's really upsetting. I can't even, like, all my kids are grown, but I just look at it this way. When you have adults, and these are sensitive subjects, I'm not name blaming or anything, but we have adults that's maybe addicted to drugs. You even have the, you know, our leaders coming out with things where we're going to do this, where we can help them, you know, do this and that, whatever. When you got adults with mental health issues, you know, you have research, you have things to do that. The youth, and especially the Black youth, and then the Kia boys and things like that. This is the one demographic of people that I see no one trying to help. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if they're looking at them like, if they keep it on, we can, you know, we can change the legislature. We could potentially get them locked up for 10 to 15 years. That's all they're thinking about when it comes to that age group. And that is sickening. I mean, if you're going to take the time to help adults who willingly, you know, with their issues, who willingly make bad decisions, I should say, why wouldn't you do it for kids whose brains are undeveloped, combined with getting poisoned? And so it's just that it's all in black and white. It's all out there. It's all we can see it. It's just like, but nobody is having the courage to actually carry it out and do things about it. But it's almost as if everybody is sitting with their hands up, waiting for the atrocity or the worstest thing that can happen to that demographic of kids happen. So I think it gotta be, regardless. I think it has to be more done.
Like, when was the last time someone sat down with the Kia boys and said, all right, y'all little menaces, what do y'all want? Like, what do you want? This is your community too. Who sat them down?
Exactly.
No one.
It's like they'd rather give an agency that does not really minimal things. Well, we're going to give them 1.2 billion to see, you know, if they can come up with a solution. They're giving it all to these, and then they're constantly funneling with money, but the problems are constantly getting worse. So I just don't understand it. Like, there's definitely things that can be done. But motivation, I guess. That's true. Are the people with the money?
Any other questions for Angela and Keisha? All right, then we'll wrap it up. It's just about 1 o'clock anyway, so that's our end time. Thank you so much, Angela and Keisha. It's just, you're just so energizing to me and just so inspirational. So thank you again for coming. And if you can stay on just for a minute after, I have a couple things I want to run by you, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
But I want to thank everybody else for spending their lunch hour with us today. And I want to let you know that our next event is a happy hour on July 14th from 4:30 to 7 at the Twisted Fisherman. It's down near the Marquette soccer fields in Potawatomi down there along the, I think the Menominee River. And that's just like a friend raiser. So we'll provide some snacks, cash bar for people to buy their own drinks, but just a gathering. Hopefully the weather will be nice. And then our next salon is July 20th, and we're going to have the Milwaukee County Circuit Court clerk candidates. So that's George Christensen and Anna Hodges doing a candidate forum where they'll each introduce themselves and then answer questions from attendees. And the election for that is, the primary is August 9th, I believe. And there are 2 Democrats for the primary, and there's no Republican candidate. So whoever wins the primary on August 9th will essentially win in November. So so it's good to learn about those 2 candidates now before the primary. Don't wait to learn more about them. And then we're trying to get on an additional salon, maybe the first week in August, with the sheriff candidates. I haven't been able, I've talked to one campaign so far, trying to get them all to come on again for a Zoom candidate forum. Again, there are only Democrat candidates in that, so the winner of the primary will essentially win in November too. So so look for those events. So for sure, July 14th and July 20th. And then maybe we're talking about getting back in person at some point for salons, maybe doing some each way. So if you have a feeling on that, a preference, please do just, reach out to me at WJI and let me know what you think about that. So again, thank you, Angela and Keisha, and we'll see everybody again next month, hopefully.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.